need. In other words, a basic human need. And I think what Viviana and the group were talking about is like maybe when it comes to those things that we need, then people are naturally selfish because, well, maybe it's not even like on a moral ground. It might just be on a survival ground, right? Like if I need air or water or food, then perhaps I'm gonna selfishly like make sure I have those, right? Like if we're say for some reason in a movie scenario where we're running out of air or something, I'm not gonna be like, no, go ahead, you first, right? Like it seems like everybody's gonna be like, no, I need to breathe, right? So in other words, can that be considered selfish if it comes to the idea of like say survival or whatnot? Good, right? So these conversations are all kind of pertinent to what we're gonna discuss today, which is this idea of selfishness, particularly as something that we kind of have been taught to kind of not be conscious of or not do. Not, I mean, we are conscious of it, but most of us have been taught to not be selfish, right? Like y'all mentioned, children in school where it's just like, hey, you got to share your toys, or you have to be good to your neighbor and whatnot like that. So in today's lesson, I want to look at further this idea of selfishness and if it's truly as bad as they say, or perhaps we're missing something. Maybe we should be selfish, and not only that, maybe it's good to be selfish, right? So we're exploring that side of the coin in today's lesson on egoism. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with a quote from Miss Ayn Rand, a female philosopher in the 20th century who believed that egoism was good. Not only was egoism good, but as you see in this quote, it is what she calls the highest moral purpose. And let me read the full quote. The achievement of his own happiness is man's highest moral purpose. And by man and the idea of his, it's not really just men or males, but really mankind. Or in other words, the achievement of a human's own happiness is their highest moral purpose. Right. So what does she mean by highest moral purpose? She doesn't mean, oh, it's a good thing to achieve your own happiness. She's not saying it's comfortable, it's convenient. No, she's putting it at the highest priority level. She's saying it's highest moral purpose. In other words, your moral purpose, your morality, the highest and most best, greatest thing you can do to be the most moral person is to achieve your own happiness. Right? In other words, above everything else, above other people's happiness, perhaps even above your other family members, or perhaps even your own siblings, or perhaps even your own children, that your happiness and the achievement of that happiness is your highest moral purpose, right? So she's going not only out on a limb here and saying, hey, what about this other side? She's saying, no, this is the way to do it. So she's saying, don't sacrifice your happiness for others. All right, so let's take a look at this idea. So egoism is, again, a philosophical theory that centers on the idea that self-interest, aka doing things that interest you, and it could be, for survival or maybe even just preference, is the foundation of morality. In other words, individuals should act in ways that maximize their own welfare and well-being. In other words, if you are not maximizing your own welfare, doing the most for you, then you're not doing it right. Right? Critics argue that egoism overlooks the importance of altruism, aka sacrificing yourself for others, or perhaps cooperation, collaborating for others on a common goal, perhaps. While proponents believe it aligns with human nature and can lead to mutually. In other words, some people say that, hey, this is how we are, it's nature, and thus we have to follow nature. And not only that, if you're being egoistic and I'm being egoistic, there's actually some mutually beneficial outcomes because of that. In other words, you benefit and I benefit if we're all being self-interested, to say the least, right? So again, going back to the types of morality, anytime we look at one of these big theories, right, like egoism, or last time we did hedonism and whatnot, we can break it down to types, right? So it could either be considered descriptive, aka how society is, we're just observing it, right? We're describing how it is. Or it could be prescriptive, saying, no, it should be like this because that's the right way to be. So just like in hedonism, there's a descriptive view and a prescriptive view for egoism as well. So the first one being descriptive type of egoism, also known as psychological egoism. In other words, where you're describing the world as is, you will notice that the world and the people in it will always act towards their self-interest. Everyone is naturally forced to look out for themselves. In other words, if psychological egoism is to be considered true, then everyone is naturally egoistic. AKA, everyone's naturally, on some level, selfish, if you believe that psychological egoism is true. And some of y'all did. Some of y'all says, like, I think people are naturally selfish, right? If, though, you're being prescriptive, then you're considering ethical egoism to be true, then what you're saying is that people should be selfish and that people should act towards their self-interest. In other words, like Ayn Rand said, it is our moral obligation to fulfill our own interests. It's very simple. No one knows what makes you happy but you. Sometimes you don't even know. But for the most part, if there's anybody that might get the best idea of how to make you happy, it's probably you. I mean, you could be married for 20, 30 years. Your parents made you, but ultimately you have access to that internal condition that defines your happiness. So why would you not be the one that gets it? In other words, you are the one that knows what makes you happy, so you should be in charge of doing so. In fact, Ayn Rand says again, that should be your highest priority, to make yourself happy at whatever cost and above other people's happiness. You're not here on this earth to make other people happy. You're here on this earth. Well, I shouldn't say that. You're not here on this earth to make other people happy above your own happiness. If you making people happy makes you happy, then you're good, because you're ultimately, right, getting a benefit out of it. And they're probably getting a benefit too, mutually beneficial. And so the egoist would say, look, by you doing this and getting happiness, other people are benefiting, then that's what's wrong with that, right? So let me ask you all this. Looking at these two types of theories, which one do you think is true? Do you feel like psychological egoism is true? And or do you think ethical egoism is true? In other words, if you think psychological egoism is true, then you mean that people are naturally selfish. If it comes to ethical egoism, then you might think that people may not be selfish, but they need to be to lead a good, happy life, right? Think about. Let me hear what you guys have to say, and then we'll go on with more examples. So Kristen says she believes, she picks ethical egoism, that people should be obliging to their own interest, right? Others, and you can just type it on the chat.
I agree with ethical egoism is because yes, you have to put people first at times, like when they're hurting, when they need something for you, like in time of need. But you also have to fill up your own cup for yourself. And you have to put in self-love, self-care back into yourself, especially if people don't fill your cup the right way.
Right. Now, ethical egoism says you should fill your cup first, and then if there's anything left over, fill other people's cup. Do you agree with that statement?
Yes, because if you're not whole and you're not like centered, you can't help people at the same time, you know?
Yeah, no, yeah, sure. Anyone else feel different than say? I mean, again, you don't have to choose between these two either, right? You can say, no, I don't like ethical egoism. I don't think you should be selfish, or maybe I'm more sacrificial than I am, and I'm being happy being sacrificial. Anybody else going against ethical egoism? It seems like people are all for it. Maybe you
I mean,
guys are just hungry and looking at the
I
books.
think that there's like different situations in which you would need either. Like I think of survival of the fittest and just like I don't know, I was watching Squid Games and I don't know if y'all have heard of that show, but
Mhm.
like it's crazy to see the social experiment that they test out on like how far people will go for money, aka like killing each other and like things like that. So that just makes me think that like yes, you would want to lean towards one side, but depending on what you need, like you may choose the other side, I guess.
Are good, right? And right, especially when the people are in those extreme survival situations, Squid Games and whatnot. It is like the purge, right? Where it's just like, look, survival of the fittest. But the idea here is also again morality, right? Because we're saying that egoism is ethical in a sense. So, Josh, do you think that egoism is ethical? What in whatever situation you think you brought up.
Hmm. Think that I would say I want to say no, but I feel like yes. Or well, I'm gonna say no. I'm gonna say no.
Hey, look, you can take whatever you want, but I mean, let's be real, right? Like if you were in the Squid Games, right, and it was your life versus someone else's life, what would you think would be the right thing to do?
Hey, sayonara.
Would it
I'd
be
be like
your life or their life?
definitely mine.
Right. So, if that's the choice you're making, then you're also making the assumption that it is right to be egoistic. It is morally right to be egoistic, right? Which was the question for the do now, right? Which do you think it's moral to be egoist? So, in other words, egoists are saying yes, it is not just good or convenient or beneficial. It is moral. It is right to be egoistic, right? Anybody disagree with, say, psychological egoism, saying, people are not all people are selfish? Any glimmer of hope out there?
I think it also just depends on who we're speaking to. As for instance, we can say one of the social experiments that we spoke about was an Ethiopian, I guess, environment. For example, there are some environments that rely on the environment and the people around them as a village to create a sound environment or at least a socially accepted environment. Whereas in for us Americans, we believe in um, what is it? I just listed. I'm sorry, the American Dream. So the American Dream automatically makes us, I guess, more psycho like more selfish.
Individualistic and self-interested, yeah.
Definitely. So I think it just depends on who we're speaking to, also, because for example, a lot of our environment plays a role in that as well.
Good. So would you say that I like that. I like bringing that other aspects of sociology or politics into it. Would you say, Alyssa, then that the United States is psychologically egoistic?
I believe to a certain extent because the example of the American dream. It depends on how much you're willing to put into your own investment. For example, education. Like you said, it gives us more opportunities as into jobs. Whereas in if you don't have an education, it's more limited. So it really depends on how far you're willing to go to obtain a happy life.
Good. I like that. And right. And some of the proponents of psychological egoism might say it's like, look, it's not all bad to be self-interested. You know, this whole thing of selfishness is there's a bad word to it that elementary teachers put on. You know, in other words, it's like, listen, like the United States in a capitalistic society, would the rest of us not benefit from you looking out for your self-interest? In other words, like say for example, you like education or school. Like, would we not benefit as a society from say more educated people living out here? Right? Like you're perhaps self-interested. Like, look, I want to go to college and school so I can get more money and a better job and be happier for me. But doesn't the society also benefit from that? Right? We do, right? We benefit from people that are educated, and we benefit from people that have degrees. Like, you know, we have more doctors and we have more teachers and we have, you know, people that have, you know, have experience doing certain services and whatnot because of that education. So even though you guys are right, it is a bit egoistic to just go for your own interest. Seems like we benefit from it as well. And that's kind of what egoists might say. So like, look, if everybody's acting on their own accord with towards their own self-interest, it's a good thing because the community itself will benefit from that.
I agree, but also there's some shady people that take it to their advantage a lot. For example, like I hate to say it like this, but like our government, they take a lot of like taxes, and I get it, it's to like put investment into not only education but also into making roads, helping people get homes and all that. But sometimes they take way too much, in my opinion, and they keep it, most of it, for themselves.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I mean that when you really think about it, every single thing we pay for in this United States of America is from our pocketbooks, right? Like everything, like that's how it works. Like taxes go to pay everything from the roads, like you said, to build, to the bombs that we drop, to how much money we invest in education, to how much money we invest in healthcare, and so on and so forth, right? So it seems like we're all kind of sacrificing ourselves and our money for this shared common good, but the people who are running it might see it otherwise, and may not be for the common good, right? Cool. So basically, what those that are for egoism, usually their argument stems from this idea called the argument from self-satisfaction. And it's a bit of a psychological egoism type of argument. In other words, it's saying it's like, look, if you look out into the world, right, everyone seeks satisfaction by pursuing their desires and feeling satisfaction when they achieve them, when they're successful. In other words, you know, we naturally all have desires, and not just sexual desires or you know, flesh based desires, but it could just be any type of desire, right? Like the desire to want to eat a cheeseburger today, you know, the desire to sleep in late, the desire, okay, what you want to do, right? We have different types of desires. And anytime you have a desire and you achieve that desire or you get that desire, you feel satisfaction from it. It feels good. Right? Say, for example, it's like, oh man, right now I want that cheeseburger, right? That is a desire. And then when you actually get the cheeseburger and you bite into it, that you feel satisfied, right? When you actually are successful. And you probably feel dissatisfied if you don't get that burger, right? So what this argument says is like, look, if you have desires, naturally we have desires, and we feel good when we achieve them. How is that bad? How is that immoral? They believe that all actions are driven by self-interest and desires. And we feel good when we make those things happen. It's almost like we can't help ourselves. You know, is it like, why do I have a desire to eat a burger right now? I don't know. I just want one. Am I being immoral for that? I can't help it. If I can't help it, can I be blamed for that, if you will? So what do y'all think? Do y'all agree with this argument from self-satisfaction that we all have desires? Naturally, we don't know why, but they just do. And that when we achieve them, that it feels good. Do y'all agree with that?
Yes.
Yes.
And most people are saying yes. What can go wrong with that? What's wrong with trying to achieve the desires that we have and experiencing pleasure because of it? What's wrong with that?
If they're negative,
Uh, like
like
what?
Temporary.
morally.
Okay, can you give us an example?
Like if someone has the desire to, like, I know you said it could like not be like sexually, but if somebody has the desire to like have sex with someone, but then they get like turned down and they end up like taking it anyways, then it's like, okay, they might have got self-satisfaction, but that's not morally like right to do.
Good. That's a good example. So there was a radical philosopher by the name of Sod, right? That's where we get the term sadism, right? Where his view on sex and love, Marquis de Sade, I think his name was, his view was to be specifically egoistic. In other words, he said is, why is it that my, aka desires, should be not met because of your pain? In other words, you were saying is like, I think my desires outweigh your pain. If the desires that I have,
That's disgusting.
all right, sorry, say it again, Kristen.
I'm sorry. I just said that's like gross. Like for somebody to think like, why should I care about your feelings if it makes me happy? In a sense, like if it's negative, like if you're with someone and your family doesn't approve of it, okay. Sometimes like it's like okay, whatever. Like what their feelings don't matter. But when it's something that's like physically harming someone else, like that's
Right. So in a sense, he was really like advocating for rape as well, and would say is like, look, this is what makes me happy. This is my desire. If I have the desire to do rape or to rape someone, and I get pleasure by achieving it, why should I not do it? Which is kind of like the argument from Ted Bundy too, right? Where he said it's like, look, if what's the difference between you getting pleasure in eating of bacon and me getting pleasure in doing this act? Same type of pleasure. There's no different types of pleasure. There's not good pleasure, bad pleasure. Like it's just pleasure. It just feels good. I can't help it that it feels good, is what they say. Right? So how would we respond to that? Right? Well, some might say it's like, look, it's not all egoism. Psychological egoism is false. Not everyone is naturally selfish. Like, yeah, you might have desires, and it might feel good if you fulfill them, right? But, right, someone else is impacted, right? In other words, there are people that are not egoistic, right? So that's the first kind of idea. That there isn't the existence of altruism. And I'm reading the critiques here on the side. Two, it's an oversimplification. The world is a little bit more complicated than that, right? We're not cavemen. We're not cave people. Like me feel good, do bad things to you, right? Like blah, blah. Like it's a little bit more nuanced than that, right? Not only that, there's also laws, right, that we have to follow. There's pain for other people. There's consequences for everything, right? There's empathy, right? People are empathetic. There's a complexity in motives, right? Why do people do things? Sometimes people do things not because they feel good, because they, like we talked about before, maybe it's their obligation or their duty, right? So it's not always about following your desires. Sometimes there is a thing called the common good or empathy, right? It's just like Okay, maybe you find somebody very attractive and you desire to sleep with them, but you don't assault them, right? In other words, we still need consent, right? We still need non-violent action in this world, right? And rape is one of the most awful acts of violence you can perform, right? Four, no morality. Well, if you are just driven by self-interest and desires and feelings, where's the morality? Right? If everyone's being selfish, where is the morality in this world? Does that mean that there is no morality? And again, the other critique is that you lack evidence by saying that everyone is only egoistic. There's a full range of human behaviors and feelings, and there's not just either and. It's almost a fallacy, saying either you're selfish or not. Well, it's like some of you guys said. It's like it could be situational. Sometimes you need to be selfish. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes it's good to be selfish. Sometimes it might not be good to be selfish. Right? In the case of maybe the last slice of pizza, maybe be a little bit selfish if you're hungry and haven't eaten all day, and the other person perhaps just came from dinner. Sure, be selfish a little bit. Maybe if you're into Squid Games, it's like it's either my life or your life. I don't want to die. Like what can I say? When it comes to like Ted Bundy or Marquis de Sade that wants to rape people, it's just like, okay, we're drawing the line here, right? Like, no. Right? So again, it could be situational too. Here's to change the topic a little bit lighter example for this discussion on selfishness. So this is from the show called Friends. I'm sure you guys have heard of it. And they talk a little bit about this conversation we're having about whether or not egoism is true or altruism is true, and so on and so forth. I thought it was pretty good and right on with what we're talking about. So here we go.
Sorry, Phoebes. I just wanted to do a good deed, like you did with the babies.
This isn't a good deed. You just want to get on TV. This is totally selfish.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. What about you having those babies for your brother? Talk about selfish.
What are you talking about?
Well, yeah, it was a really nice thing and all, but it made you feel really good, right?
Yeah, so?
Well, it made you feel good, so that makes it selfish. Look, there's no unselfish good deeds, sorry.
Yes, there are. There are totally good deeds that are selfless.
Well, may I ask for one example?
Yeah, it's, there's... No, you may not.
That's because all people are selfish.
Are you calling me selfish?
Are you calling you people? Yeah, well, sorry to burst that bubble, Phoebes, but selfless good deeds don't exist, okay? And you know the deal on Santa Claus, right?
I'm gonna find a selfless good deed. I'm gonna beat you, you evil genius.
It's just a short clip. Pretty funny stuff, but
Sorry, Phoebes.
that is literally the conversation, right? It's just like, on the Joey side, he's saying it's like there's no one that is not selfish. In other words, the way you would find that is like, is anybody actually doing a truly unselfish act? And what they're saying is, when most people say is like, maybe that, even when you sacrifice yourself, like you're really doing it to get that good feeling, that meeting your desire thing. Like, for example, if you give money to like a homeless person, like, oh, here you go, I'm sacrificing my money for you. It's only like $1, right? Like, is that really a sacrifice? And two, aren't you almost like buying like your good feelings for that dollar? It's just like, oh, I'm such a good person. Look what I just did. I just donated $1 or $2 to this homeless person. Oh, I'm a good guy. It's just like you're buying that feeling. You know what I mean? So is that really altruistic? Is that really, morality? It would be the question.
Sorry, Phoebes.
So I'll leave you with a paradox, and here this will be the last thing we discuss, which is, again, revisiting this, what we call the paradox of hedonism. We've talked about it before, right? But let's do it a slightly different scenario here. So I'm going to give you two options, and I want us to discuss which option you think would be the one to choose, right? So the first option is this. In this scenario, you could rob a bank. You are successful at robbing the bank, but you killed somebody in the process of robbing the bank president, and perhaps another witness. That's all you get away with it. But in short, you get away with it. Now you took a lot of money, you got away with it, and you left the country, and you're now like in a beach in Mexico with enough money to hold you over for the rest of your life because prices are a little cheaper over there because of the dollar exchange. And you're enjoying your life somewhere on the beach, just drinking, starting a new life, having a good time. Or you can choose option B, where you spend a normal life in the working class. You're not a criminal, but you have to go to work and traffic, and you got to pay taxes, and you can get fired and rehired, and all that stuff that involves us, living a normal life, if you will. So if option A gives you, say, 1,000 hedons of happiness, in other words, you are more happy if you go with option A, and option B only gives you like half of that, like 500 option. In other words, you're less happy in the normal life, as if if you are spent the rest of your life in a beach, having awesome beach life. A gives you more happiness, B does not. Which option would you choose, and then perhaps why? First, just kind of give me your answer. What option are you choosing, A or B? This is a good question to weed out any Ted Bundys. I'm just kidding. All right, seems like everyone's choosing B, which I'm glad. But can I have somebody? Yeah, and the hedon. I'll be honest with you. A hedon is not a real unit, right? I mean, it'd be cool if we could actually measure happiness and be like, hey, do you want to watch this movie? I don't know. It's only going to give me like 300 hedons. This other movie is going to give me 500 hedons. So let's go. We don't really know what causes happiness in that sense. We don't have. It's not a real unit, but we can say that, at least for this scenario, that maybe A provides an easier life with more chances for pleasure and feeling good and happiness. All right. So can I have somebody come off mute and tell me why you choose option B?
I mean, option A sounds great. Like if you were like in the movies, like Mission Impossible or something, like something with heist movies, theoretically it looks like fun, but like in reality, like once you do all that, wouldn't you feel guilt? And like, was the money really worth it? Feeling all that guilt, you know? Versus B, like, yeah, life is hard. You can get fired from your job and you have to pay bills. But you know what? As far as I'm concerned, God promised us a life, but not an easy one. There's going to be challenges.
Okay. Now let me ask you this. I'm always going to be pushing on you. Is the reason why you don't choose A, is it because you don't want to feel guilty?
If I'm being honest, yes. Because guilt is one of the few emotions that is not only negative, but it's the worst feeling you can possibly feel by hurting someone else for your own selfish reasons.
Okay, good. Now, stay with me, Ayana, and others. Imagine that you also have enough money to buy the new medicine, the new pill that they invented, which gets rid of guilt. And in your new life at the beach, you have a plentiful supply of this new medicine that gets rid of guilt. You just pop a pill, and or not, now you don't feel guilty. Maybe you keep drinking Mai Tais with that pill, and it feels great. Would you perhaps consider choosing A?
No, because guilt is an emotion. You can't suppress emotions. Whatever emotion you feel that comes to the surface, you have to feel it. you can only suppress it for so much in your head.
Well, like I said, you have enough pills to last you a while, maybe a lifetime. You're in perhaps Mexico, right? They have cheaper medicines over there, and of course, this pill doesn't exist. But if it did, and you know, there are pills that change our mood and whatnot. It's not that impossible to think that a pill could get rid of our guilt for whatever reason.
I've
Uh,
seen enough documentaries to know that like murderers say that they see those faces every night. Like it's not so you lose sleep over it. So even if the guilt goes away during the day, at night you're not going to rest peacefully as you would if you had not killed those people. So guilt doesn't always play into effect. It also is like something that haunts you.
right. So,
And and I'm
sorry.
telling you, cheating and stealing and hurting people and lying always come back to haunt you. So it's always better to tell the truth, be honest, and never ever hurt people for your own benefits. It's like, for instance, let's say you have a best friend, right? And they have a boyfriend or a girlfriend, and all of a sudden you have a sudden attraction to them. Oh no, you're about to break up your friendship over someone that they're with. And you just cost yourself not only a friendship, but you just broke a relationship at the same time.
Now, I have also heard of situations like that where the cheaters end up getting married and live a very happy life. So perhaps that is a good paradox of hedonism scenario. If you met the love of your life, but they were dating your friend, would you not try to take them away or them away?
No, because what's the point of like breaking up your friendship just for one person? Like, are they that special though? Like, if you really, really were looking like more into like the world of people, you could find someone better if I'm being 100% honest.
Yeah, for sure, right? Luckily, right? There's 8 billion of us, so hopefully you can find a better option than the one that your friend has, right? But that's kind of the idea, right? It is like, and some people do like you've heard of these scenarios where people, they break up friendships so that they can start those relationships, and that's really kind of like in this scenario where it's like you're choosing your own happiness perhaps over someone else's happiness. Or you can say it's like, oh, they'll find somebody. I found mine. This one's mine. You'll find somebody else, bro. Right? Like, when it comes to morality, is it the bad? Is it that bad? Right? Again, if you get away with it, Plato talked about the ring of Gyges, right, which was like a ring that allowed you to be invisible once you put it on. And his thought was that everyone here who puts it on some level, will try to get away with things, especially if no one knew you had the ring. If you were the only one, say you found the ring out in the forest or something, and no one's heard of the ring of Gyges, you put it on and you become invisible. Plato would say, naturally, we would all try to get away with something. Right? Some people would do different things than others, but everyone would use it. First of all, everyone would try to use it and get away with something. I don't know. Maybe perhaps we'll talk about it next class as well. And all of this stems from Hobbes' argument of predominant psychological egoism. So he says, yes, people are naturally selfish and egoistic and self-interested. Think about it this way. Imagine that we existed outside a society, which he calls the state of nature. And within the state of nature, there are no laws, there are no agreed upon morality, right? Just everyone versus everyone, right? Survival of the fittest, if you will. What type of life would we all be living? Think about it. There are no means of settling conflicts. There's no laws. There's no judiciary. There's no authority. Right? Violence will probably be the only way to solve problems. life, as he says, would be solitary, lonely, poor, right, nasty, brutish, and short. Very tough. Right? And he comes up with this thought experiment for two reasons. One, to kind of highlight how perhaps humans were before civilization, before laws and agreed upon morality, before government, right? And two, to really kind of look into the nature of our morality. In other words, is that the only reason we establish a common morality or a basic code of ethics or a law system in government so that we do not kill each other? In other words, look, the only reason I don't want to harm you is because I don't want to get harmed. Almost like an inverted golden rule, right? And that is what Hobbes agreed with. He says, look, people are all just naturally, we are part of the animal kingdom ourselves. We are animals. Just because we're, smart animals and we wear nice little shirts and we have systems that we build like, capitalism and communism and socialism. And, we build technology and little computers to do our work and see each other. Just because we do have all these things that we've invented does not take away the fact that we are instinctual animals. We're just another species on this earth. So if you don't place morality upon, say, the animal kingdom, right, couldn't that just be something that we constructed ourselves? Maybe that's the difference between us and the lower animals, is that they don't have the brains to construct morality to keep the peace. And if so, isn't morality just some invention that humans invented to keep the peace? And there's no real right and wrong. It's just stuff that we agree and disagree with. Right? And that was Hobbes's argument. And reason for being egoistic is like, look, that's just how we are. So I have here one more video that you can kind of look at on your own time that discusses the idea of perhaps being selfish, not as bad as we think it is, if you do it the right way, right? So I implore you to look at it on your own time. But because of the lack of time that we have now within this lesson, we're going to go skip right through this stuff and go to the exit ticket. And I want to read it before we get out of here. 1, explain what egoism is. What is egoism? 2, do you agree with Hobbes, right? That life would be solitary, nasty, brutish, and short without this sort of quote unquote morality? And do you think there's a difference between good and bad selfishness? So give me your thoughts for these 3 questions in your exit ticket. And with that, we are good to go on today's lesson. I'll stick around for anybody that needs any more clarity. Have a good one, y'all. Adios.
Is the slides posted on Canvas yet or no?
Let me check here.